Car repossession crisis is absolutely real, and it's the worst it's ever been. Lenders are also giving money to subprime borrowers at a higher rate than they've ever done. We're seeing vast amounts of negative equity increases. Cost of living, the cost of food, housing, and cars, insurance is all going through the roof. Layoffs upon layoffs, we're seeing it all over the industry. Corporations from Google to the energy sector, to vehicles. We're hearing the latest Tesla actually punted 10% of their workforce, about 14,000 people getting laid off this week. Literally, the cost of living crisis is real, and unfortunately, the banks continue doling out the money to people that probably shouldn't be getting the money in the first place. Car repossessions are an absolute mess. Good morning, my savory seeds of sunshine. Welcome back. We want to talk about the car repossession crisis as well as the cost of living and what that looks like as the year goes on, because things are changing and not necessarily for the good. And we've been hoping for some time to see some good news in terms of lending rates. But on the contrary, we see people continually spending. Cost of living crisis is real, and it's climbing because inflation continues to climb. Inflation's climbing because everything's going up and people are still spending the money that they make, or even more money that they don't make. A big part of all of this inflationary impact is the fact that people are spending on large items, houses and cars. But who's buying cars? Well, a lot of prime buyers are people that can easily afford it, but unfortunately, a lot of people that shouldn't be buying them and probably can't afford them, but banks are spreading the availability and options that are given to some of these borrowers that probably shouldn't be getting their hands on some of these vehicles, making and driving inflation up. With some improvements we've seen based on the Dealertrack credit and availability score, we're actually seeing some reversing. Over the last 3 months or the last quarter, what we've seen, and we've talked about this, obviously people have had a harder time getting a car loan. The banks have become a little bit nervous. They've reached out. They've pulled back some of the repossessions. Delinquency rates, by the way, are actually down, but full-on defaults are going up. And it's a sad state of affairs as people hit negative equity. They can't afford to pay for their new or used car. And sadly, this is just leading to this crisis. But with this last 3 months of tightening, we're seeing a little bit of a reversing trend where absolutely they're opening the doors to allow more people and the floodgates open to more people to buy cars again. Certified pre-owned vehicles are easier vehicles to get your hands on based on banks and their risk tolerance that they're looking at. Whereas you go to one of those corner creepy greasy lots that have barbed wire and razor wire over the top, some of those car lots that are trying to pull out the stops and lend cars or lend money and lending to you as the buyer, subprime buyer, are probably having a lot harder time fulfilling those orders. But at the end of the day, used car sales, new car sales are actually both down. So sales themselves, as part of the inflationary impact, are slightly dropping. It's all the other factors that are hitting the consumer very, very hard. Subprime share jumped, approval rating jumped, and even negative equity jumped as well. These are all indications that it just made consumers a lot easier to get a hold of their next new car loan. However, there's a caveat. Yield spreads widened and term length declined, making it harder for those that can't make those larger payments get access to their new or used car. And some of those moves actually reduce the capacity for borrowers to actually take money out for that car. Down payments really haven't changed all that much. People don't have a lot of extra money, and we've said this time and time again. I said the more deposit or down payment you can put on your used or new car, the better off you're likely going to be. I know that's something that's a game I play, and literally the more money I can put up front, it just means life's going to be that much easier. If I can put an extra $10,000, it might drop me an extra $300 a month, $400 a month on my car payment. It just makes my life just that much simpler and easier in the long run. It's less strain and struggle. So if you can come up with a larger down payment on your new car, then you're likely going to be in a better position. I always suggest go at least 20% and try to keep your car payments down to less than 10% of your monthly gross income. Now, according to the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, unfortunately, we're seeing inflationary rates continue to climb. We're actually seeing a hotter market in March than we saw in almost months previous. Very similar rates to what we saw in February, which is not an indication to the banks and the reserves. When they see hot numbers like that, that means lots of spending. That means they have to continue maintaining those high interest rates. I really hope they don't continue to rise them even further, because right now it's bad enough with people trying to renew some of their mortgages or buy their cars or high ticket items. Nobody wants to be backed against the wall with some huge interest charges. But that's in fact what we continue to see. And I don't know if we're in a position where we're going to see the banks or reserves drop interest rates anytime soon. And that applies pretty much to Canada, US, across the board. Spending is on an all-time high. And the headline aggregate increased 0.4% on a seasonally adjusted basis and marked 3 months of higher than expected results. The core CPI, which excludes for food and energy, also increased by 0.4%, showing that it was stronger than expected as well. Transportation costs increased much more than almost every other impact. 1.0% is what we saw. 1.7% up in costs of fuel, 2.3% maintenance and repairs, and cost of parts. I told you about my Ram, the 2003 Ram. I'm finding I had to go buy some parts recently, and even at the parts bin, they're rising these costs. So parts, the service rates, of course, the shop rates, shop fees for any of these vehicle repairs is always on the upclimb, and we're seeing that right now. As well as a 2.6% increase in insurance costs, which unfortunately are a bad state of affairs too, because we're seeing Teslas and a lot of these very complex vehicles coming out now that are getting written off because of expensive batteries, unique body panels, glass coverage, and a lot of these impacts with thefts. We're hearing a lot of thefts in a lot of the big cities like Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, Montreal. It's all over the globe in North America, and we're seeing a lot of these either going overseas, going south of the Mexican border. They're going all over the place, but staying in their owner's driveway. But would you believe it? We've actually seen this month a decline in the average sale price of a vehicle, 0.2% for new vehicles and 1.5% down on used cars. In other words, we're seeing more inventory of used vehicles. Now, hitting tax time, of course, that could flip again as shortages are there and we're starting to build up inventory. It's hard to say exactly where that market's going to go, but we are seeing decreases in this last month in terms of the average sale price of new and used vehicles, which is slightly optimistic if you're looking or considering buying a new or used car. Yes, we're seeing improvements and it's trending the right way, but I would suggest we continue to wait. If you can wait, definitely watch for the deals as the year goes on. However, on a year-over-year basis, the consumer price index has actually remained at about an even-keeled 3.8%. That's actually the lowest since April of 2021. However, with that said, the overall consumer price index actually went up in February from 3.2 to 3.5%. And while we did see some softening in the inflation rate since September of 2023, where it was topped out at 3.7%, we've obviously dropped and now we're starting to rise again. We're seeing increased spending, cars, houses, and just the general cost of living, energy costs. And for those thinking that a small increase in the cost of fuel in the United States is a big impact, try Canada on for size. We'll get to that. With what we're seeing, most consumer sentiment is actually declining. A big part of that is just the overall confidence. While some people are all going out there buying, like drunken sailors, buying their new car, their new truck, paying 80 grand for a new Jeep or 90 grand for a new truck, or even 40 grand for a new Jeep Compass, people are going out there buying, they're spending. But with that said, that's a small margin of people. Most people I speak to, a lot of people that reach out to me personally via email, on the comments section, are telling me, I don't have the money, including myself. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't have the money to spend on all these large ticket items. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. But so overall, market confidence is low. We have increased taxation, inflation's on the rise, interest rates don't seem to be dropping anytime soon. Governments are a little polarizing. We don't know what's going on. On both sides of the border, US, Canada, things are kind of heating up. So it's kind of hard to say where this entire market's going, but people and consumers are generally losing a little bit of confidence. Did you know the cost of gas is going up to the point where a lot of people are choosing just to walk, maybe take the bus, possibly buy that battery-powered scooter? Yes. The average price of unleaded fuel has gone up 2.8% in April in the United States, but generally at $3.63 a gallon, year over year, it's relatively unchanged. I mean, there's some peaks and some highs and lows. With vacation season, we're seeing changes. But for Americans that think $3.63 US a gallon is a lot of money, did you realize in Canada, so if you go overlook Vancouver or Vancouver Island, parts of Canada are paying $2. I spoke to somebody that actually registered the sign, the advertisement for $2.45 a liter of gas. That's right, and that's regular fuel. Things are absolutely out of control here in Canada. Taxes are way too high, and that, again, has a major impact on overall confidence of the buyers, the sentiment, and just the overall confidence in buying any large ticket items. People can't barely afford to live in a house. People are renting, paying $2,500 a month for renting a little shanty in Vancouver. The big cities like Vancouver City as well as Toronto have cost of living increases that are just way beyond what people can tolerate. I mean, people are living on the streets. They're living in tents. And that's no joke. That is no joke. You walk down some of those big cities, anywhere you go, you're seeing a lot of it. And it's growing. It's an alarming rate because people can't afford to live. It's a cost of living crisis is beyond just the nice to haves. It's beyond just to be able to afford that nice new car and maybe I'll drive the old one. It's way beyond that. People just don't have the means to even put a burger in their mouth when they're hungry. So this repossession conversation is an absolute bizarre one because we're seeing the 60 plus day delinquencies. So that's people that are just late. They call their bank, hey, I need a little extension. Those actually have gone down. A little bit of a slide here in March to April. However, year over year, they're still more or less up 8.5%, and that's on delinquencies in general. Again, not necessarily giving the keys back, but having that conversation with the bank. So in March, about 1.88% were actually severely delinquent, which was actually slightly down from 2.04% in February. So that's a little bit of an improvement. And that was the highest we've ever seen since at least 2006. Absolutely devastating. Remember some of the issues we saw back in the early 2000s? Yes, we're here. It's back. We also saw about 7.25% of the subprime extreme delinquencies back in March. It's just bad. It's rough. People are having a tough time keeping ahead of their payments. But it is actually down from 7.99% we saw in February. So again, the overall delinquency rate seems to be going down for prime, subprime buyers. And we're literally seeing a situation where for some reason, maybe they're better at communicating. Maybe for some odd reason, the banks are a little more forgiving. But whatever it is, delinquencies are slightly dropping in this last month. However, repossessions, or what we call defaults in the business, have actually gone up by an extraordinary amount in February to March. We're seeing about an 8.5% increase and up 33.4% year over year, which is a clear indication people have finally broken. Their backs are broken. They can't afford to make the payments and they just walk away. They're like, here's the keys. Here's all. I don't even care anymore. I got to feed the kids. I got to have a roof over my head. I got to just figure this out. But whatever it is, this car payment is just way more than I can handle. Way bye-bye to the car payments. Subprime defaults, on the other hand, are up about 13.9%, almost 14% up in this last month. As well, we're seeing about a 28% year over year. So clearly, even the subprime buyers are in the same state of hurt. Whether you're subprime, prime, nobody's exempt. Cost of living crisis is real and we're all feeling it big, bad, and ugly. This is a bad, tough situation, and the worst part is we're not seeing any relief anytime soon. The government's not dropping the interest rates. We're not seeing that because inflation's the trigger. And if inflation continues to rise, why would the banks, which is their only lever that they can pull, activate that lever and actually drop interest rates, which would further enhance and drive inflation to a newfound level? They're not going to do that. They have to see at least a couple or 3 quarters to actually see some obvious trending to say, you know what, no, we're comfortable with the fact that people legitimately have no money. People have no money, take my word for it. So it's a smaller percent of the upper percentile that seems to be buying all these cars and houses and transfer of wealth. And that's actually what's happening and driving the GDP and driving the cost of living up because inflation continues to rise. But the middle class, like myself, like probably a lot of you folks there, are struggling because we're caught up understanding between mixed signals here. I can't afford to eat, but yet the bank's still charging me more. Like, what more do they need to do? And they continue to tax us even harder day in, day out. As a matter of fact, you'd hear today, Canada's releasing its new budget, expectations for absolutely obliterating levels of increased taxes and, of course, reduction in services. So things are going not in a great way. And you want to understand a little bit more about how, in fact, bad things are getting? Right there, check it out. Car buyers literally panic with this massive debt. Would you believe people are paying as much as $1,600 a month for their car payments? Not sure. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.